Hello, everyone. Hold on. I've got to check something. Welcome to our third podcast on the subject of the three streams of love. Today, we're looking in kind of a cursory way because these are not in-depth conversations on the father aspect, which is important. So it's Monday the 17th. Have we gotten that far into February already? Holy mackerel. Yep. Monday the 17th. That's how it goes. Flies by. So we've been talking about three streams of love. And if we're empowering ourselves with love, which is our mission at the Love Foundry, then we need to bring in the three aspects of love that by their creative power manifest the entire universe. And in the third aspect of love, the mother aspect, the feminine aspect, the Holy Ghost aspect, we looked at the system whereby everything gets manifested. Remember, it's the feminine that builds the seven planes. As you look at this print behind me, you see these different rings. Well, they're symbolic of the seven planes of the universe. And they can only be described in this world in a three-dimensional way, which makes it look like those seven ivory balls that are carved one within the other in India by some really talented people. But in fact, in the actual dimensional reality of the universe, each inner ball is greater than the one outside of it. So as you move towards the center of the universe, in the fourth dimension and up levels, you discover that everything in there is bigger than the one outside of it. And that all of it is inside us, each human being. It's in there. It's right in there. Right in there. And you can see it in there if you take the time to work at opening the inner senses, which are able to register energies, forms, creations in those various kingdoms or dimensions or levels of frequency. So the mother is building all of that. It's out of her intelligence that all the lives on all those various levels, from that center one there out to the outer, all manifest their life and forms and all the interaction that's going on in the mother. And that's symbolic in our material world as the seven sisters of the Pleiades. And so, whereas the life that's coursing through all those seven sisters, those seven planes, is the life of the Father, which is symbolized by, in our astrological universe, physical universe, actually, even though we name it astrologically, it's physical, it's based upon physical reality. The seven stars of the Great Bear as a single cosmic being manifesting through seven Reeses, as they call them, which are the seven spirits before the throne of God in the spiritual context in the West, and many other names, Vishnu and Shiva and those other elementals and lives in the Eastern, and other things in other cultures in their mythologies, as is Zeus and so on. So the second aspect, the sun aspect, of course, is manifested through a combination of experience between the first aspect, those seven spirits, as they demonstrate the seven streams of life, the one life broken down into three streams cosmically, and then seven streams locally, if you might put it in those terms. And our soul nature, our permanent nature, is founded upon one of those streams, and our consciousness is growing first on that stream and the substreams of the other six, and eventually we grow bigger and synthesize more and are able to finally understand the nature of the whole thing. So that's going on in a creative and constructive and intelligent way. Now, the sun aspect of that, the Christ consciousness aspect, the result of the streams of life and the mother's building forms and experience through it, is symbolized by the Sirian, the star Sirius. It's a double star in the sense of one circling the other, and to some points of view, particularly the Dogon tribe in Africa, a triple solar system. But we haven't discovered the third sun yet, and they were the first, actually, without a telescope of any kind, to discover the dual aspect. So that represents the sun aspect in the triad, and it's ever a triad between Pleiades, Great Bear, and Sirius. And that which is beyond all three of those, just to complete the circle here, is referred to even in the esoteric texts, which are those that are predate Sanskrit, referred to as the one about whom naught can be said, because they're the highest spiritual adept on the planet, knows virtually nothing about the business of that entity as it goes about its divine purpose. Now, looking at it from the Father point of view, in terms of empowering yourself with love, is a very challenging subject, and we're going to have to approach it sort of indirectly. I am not the best, perhaps, source of information on this because my father died when I was quite young, about 12, and so I didn't really have a chance to have a lot of experience with that role in my life. He wasn't well for a while, and from injury sustained when he was young, so I can't really speak from that in some human ways, but I can, because of when you lose your father or your mother or anybody that's important to you, it leaves a big hole in your life, and that hole makes you conscious of other people's fathers and how they relate to those fathers and how they treat their fathers. So I was acutely aware growing up after that. And I had moved from a logging camp in the woods in Oregon at that particular time, although I started out in Alaska at Edna Bay, if you want to search for it in maps. In Ketchikan's where I was born, but Edna Bay is where I was living for a while. And if that looks kind of impossible in the maps, you're right. It sort of is. But then there and in other places like Flagstaff, Arizona, which was really cool because then I was like 7 or 8. And then, but when my father died, I had to move to California, or my grandfather had moved to retire. And so I got an experience of doing that kind of, which was a huge, not because of Oregon, but because of the logging camp I was living in Oregon, which is 30 miles out in the woods, and living in, what we would call relatively rural environments where you don't have a lot of international activity going on. Of course, no television, no very little radio, and just the movies that occasionally made it through whatever town I happened to be living near or in. And in a logging camp, you didn't get that. So not very broad experience, but a lot of inner experience. And then California becomes a very big jolt. But then I got a chance to go into school with a lot of people, which it's not a 2-room schoolhouse with a bell like I had in Oregon. Now all of a sudden I've got, a homeroom. So I began to watch other people's fathers and how people related to them. And some of their fathers were wonderful and paid real attention to their families. At least I thought that was wonderful because they did a lot of cool shit for their kids and for the rest of us. And then a lot of my kids, friends that I hung out with, their fathers were about as absent as mine, even though they may have been around. Some alcoholics, some just not communicative, and some just gone. So we have all of this experience with the father going on. And the stream of life that comes forth into the universe, fathering the entire universe, has given rise mostly to that idea of God and to the idea of a supreme being or someone who's in charge of everything. And that was sometimes good, sometimes bad, depending on which side of the court you were on. If you were above the salt or below the salt, which is a British term for where you sit at the table. If you're in favor with the king, in favor with the power, in favor with God, then things went along pretty well for your tribe. If you were out of favor, not so good. And this all gets charged up to the slate of the father energy, the energy that decides this is what we're going to do. And it's actually the seed that comes forth to create. Now, if you think about it, the whole universe itself is somewhat of an orphan, because not only is it a virgin universe, I mean, where's the dad? If there's no universe, there's nothing there. There's just the absence of everything. Where does it come from? Where does that seed come from? And where is the seed that it fertilizes? So the origin of the universe itself is a mystery in terms of life, how life pulled it off. But there isn't any way to not think about it as if it had to start somewhere outside of what we would call human perception or logical reality, which means some inner dimension or higher dimension or something completely outside the cosmic physical universe, something called life in some form or another, fathered it. So we've been trying to understand this since man looked up at the sky and felt there were greater things than us. That's why the first gods were like weather gods. God, the storm god, that's a common thing. Or they were warrior gods, because those guys that came out of the mountain somewhere or another and raised hell on the farmers are acting as an agent of God, because they're winning, we're losing. They got more God than we do, or something like that. So we have all of this going on in our historical culture, but it doesn't explain the reality to us. And it isn't until we get to the actual concept of Christianity, which comes from the sun aspect. It's S-U-N rather than S-O-N, but they're principally the same thing. What comes from the sun aspect is that Father is love. God is love. And and we do kind of know that love is a creative, fructifying energy. It can make things happen. and get things going and create stuff. So we look at it that way. Since that event, since the event of the Christ and the crucifixion and resurrection and so on, we started with this idea going in humanity. I mean, a fire going, and it spread across the world. And because of people being born in all these different cultures, it got born in and out of life and death. And so it's pretty much permeated the whole of humankind. Particularly if you look at humankind in terms of reincarnation, we've had 2,000 years of going and coming to spread this deeply through human experience. Now, it seems to conflict with previous ideas, even the Jehovah idea that the Jews held before their own guy. Jesus pops up and says, oh, guy, guess what? It's all inside of us, and it's love. And that's sort of like, what? Well, things progress. I'm sorry, but we weren't ready for that kind of news before. We weren't able to look inside of ourselves. And something happened that I didn't expect. Love itself, as the thing that founded the universe, as a universal being, stepped in, decided to join the human race to be of assistance to us in our struggle against forces, lives, and energies that would work against us on some level or another and help us develop ourselves toward Godhead in us. So that's a pretty cool idea, but very strange. So now we look at the God is love perspective. And then we look at, well, what about the Jehovah thing where he was not so loving all the time to everything? And he was out there somewhere, up there in the clouds. We don't know, like Zeus was and all those other pre-Jehovah gods, or not pre necessarily, but the Jews are a very old culture. And while they were having their versions of Yahweh or a storm god or a type god that was evolving gradually towards Jehovah in their consciousness, other cultures were going through Zeus and going through Odin and going through various versions of God, which they may have all been talking about the same guy, or they may all been talking about different creative powers in the universe that are maybe relatively equal, but not all up at the same time or relating to every culture the same way. We don't know. We leave that for future conversation, but the Jehovah version turns in the Jews, turns into the inner Father version as love. And it's a complicated process because the Christ person, as demonstrated by Jesus, demonstrates itself accurately through his life. He didn't tell him how God thinks or what is his science or how he's going to go about things, but it showed us, because that's what he said, even as I have done it, you do it. So it's basically a demonstration of how love itself, not the human developed self, but love in us, how it acts, how it lives, how it grows, evolves, and functions. And however that differs from the Father before, rethink it, realign yourself. Now, that would seem practical if you were just inventing a new type of physics and you said, okay, forget about the Archimedean screw. Now start thinking about this thing in terms of atoms and the energies of an atom and how all of this comes together. So, but we can't do it quite that easy because we have emotional responses. We have mental fixated ideas, and we've been taught to believe things absolutely rather than this might be a good idea, or this might be sort of okay, or this might be kind of how it works. If we were taught that way, that loosely, we might convert a little quicker to a new idea about these divine creative powers that make the universe turn. But we don't. We get fastened onto things because we feel our survival depends on being right. I think survival does depend on the fact that the father energy in the universe is real. So is the son, so is the mother. And the relationship between those three makes our universe a real thing. Now, what we have to do is let go of all the things that get in the way of those ideas. Now, the mother aspect doesn't have as many clods in the churn as does, I think, either the son aspect or the father aspect for sure. The son aspect has some difficulties to deal with based on how we relate to concepts of it being within us and our own sonship, the fact that we are that ourselves as much as Jesus was or any other being on earth, to be or not to be, is also a son of God. And there are, as they say in the East, there are those who are the son of God and know it, and then there are those who are the son of God and know it not. And knowing is the operative word in that statement, because knowing is not believing. And you can't get confused. Don't let those two things confuse you. You can believe that you're a son of God and have been told so, but that's not the same as knowing it. And if you want to empower yourself with love, you're going to come to knowing it. It is true at the Love Foundry. That's an axiom of truth, which lives that way in us. But if it doesn't live that way in you, then it's up to you to determine whether you want that to live in you, number one, and then find out from a relationship with love itself whether it is true. See, you can't make it true with belief. Belief has to be substantiated by experience through the senses in a cognitive way up here and in the heart before it can become knowing. But when it does become knowing, you can stand on it. It's a permanent physical relationship, emotional relationship, mental relationship. All three aspects of the human nature, including its ego, when I say the word ego, that throws out all kinds of problems because of the ego of God, whatever that is, and a human ego that believes itself to be separate from other things, and the love ego, which knows it is not separate from other things, and the permanent ego, which is the self, the I that is forever in you, as you grow into the universe of greater and greater realizations of what I actually includes, until you get to the I am, and then you get to the I am that, and then you get to the I am that I am, which isn't probably going to happen this afternoon. So we'll stick back with the I of the Father, the I of the Son, and the I of the Mother. Now, the mother, you have a hard time pinning down to an I because she loves, serves, and supports every single being in the universe down to the smallest atom and the greatest expressing being. If you think that an entire galaxy is one conscious being expressing itself through 200 billion stars, why not? But that is loved by the mother as a child of hers, so to speak, and an expression of the father as one who is self-willing and growing towards something far greater than itself. Because remember, there are billions of galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars in them. Some big, some little, some spiral galaxies like ours that we are on one little spiral arm of over there, sort of on the side with our solar system. And way back at the galactic center is this hot spot with billions of stars all fusing together, and around that is the constellation Draco, the dragon, wrapping itself around the core of our galaxy. It's a big deal out there. So all of this is related to the Father in terms of will. What is the will doing? And in terms of purpose, because will does not come out of passive, unexpressed will until some purpose comes forth to be animated by that will. The same will that builds a house can build a lake to put water to the house, can build any number of things because it's another expression of will from a central source of will. But each one is an expression of energy connected to purpose. And that purpose is animated itself, in the case of divine will, by harmony, because it's creating that which is in harmony with its previous creations, its future creations, and the grand unity of all the creations that will carries forth into manifestation. Now, that's the way it is in the universe, so why wouldn't it be that way with us? And then when we go back and look at the Son aspect, the Christ aspect, the Jesus aspect, as he's being embodied by love, he's talking about these things. And he's describing his relationship to the Father, to will, and to how he goes about his expression. And when he says, I'm going off to the Father at the end of the crucifixion story, he's talking about going and getting something that he feels he needs to complete the journey that didn't get completed because they cut the journey a little short by forcing the crucifixion on him. So what we find is that the harmony was not strong enough. The power of human response and its will, its Father aspect, towards its own Son aspect of love was not harmonious enough, strong enough in harmony to carry forward, to go on forward and include it. I mean, nobody had to kill the guy. It wasn't as if he was threatening anybody. In fact, that's the reason Judas turned on him. Judas betrays the Christ. Why? What did he find him coming up short in? He was pumping out miracles as if it was a machine, and giving really good advice and talking about getting along and love and all those things that go with it. But Judas was looking for something different. He was looking for a king, which kind of is how the Jesuits interpreted it later, if you want to look at it that way. But Judas was looking for a boss. He was looking for somebody who would kick ass and take names because he believed in Jehovah. And remember, the Jews were an extraordinarily spiritual group. They were the Essenes. They had this wonderful inner life of spirit connected to Yahweh, connected to the gods, connected to the principles of life and spirit and living. And so they were looking for somebody who would take charge. The Romans were running roughshod over them. King Herod was a lunatic and doing some really awful stuff. And so they were looking for somebody to show up and put things right. And Judas realizes at some point this Jesus character, who he had found and followed and was sincere about, was so loving and so giving and so humble towards every single thing he met that he wasn't going to kick ass and take names. Just not going to happen. So at some point or another, he's convinced that he's followed the wrong guy. And this does happen in betrayal. Somebody whispers in your ear and he says, this isn't what you're looking for. And so you fall for it. Same thing that happened to Gandhi when he was eventually assassinated. The guy that killed him realized the moment that Gandhi was shot, that he was dying, he called out to Krishna. I don't know exactly what his last words were, but he turned and faced that direction, I think probably east in his case, and called out to the god of love, which is what Krishna was, a previous god in the Hindu cycle. And the guy knew, as Judas knew, the moment he did it, that that had been a serious mistake. He thought he was doing a good thing when he was actually harming that thing. So these things happen. And in Judas' case, the Father, as he saw it, was not being demonstrated through Jesus. Now, maybe he thought the mother was. Maybe he thought Jesus was too soft, too feminine. But in fact, we realize, looking at the life of this young man who was 30 years old when he started this story, Marty's outside the door grumbling because I haven't let him in. If you hear that, sounds like a threatening grumble. It's a 13-pound dog telling me I better let him in or else. So anyway, Judas makes a decision and acts on it for $30. I don't know how much a piece of silver was worth then, but they weren't that big, those little pieces of silver. So I don't know, maybe you wouldn't get much more than $30 for it now. That's another subject. The price of silver. Yeah. But he realized he'd sold himself out and sold out his buddy and made a big mistake, because we look at Jesus and we realize this is a man of extraordinary will. I mean, it takes a lot to stand in the face of the world and never for a second waver. I mean, not for a second did he in anywhere in the story come up against somebody. And look, it takes a lot of nerve to tell Lazarus to get up and come on outside once he's been proclaimed dead. It takes a lot of nerve to heal people, because you have to look in the face of the obvious certainty of a dread disease and banish it from that body and relieve it with love and healing. So, and then when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and he tries to get his Father to step up and give him something he can make this thing go right with, because he realizes things aren't going to work out the way he had hoped it. And he finally, after sweating blood to meditate, when all the disciples fell asleep on him, he realizes it isn't going to happen that way. It's going to happen a different way. And that's when he, as biblically expressed it, sets his face, his will, to go to Jerusalem, which isn't just around the corner. But when nobody's driving anywhere, just around the corner can seem like quite a ways. So he does, knowing that he's stepping not only into the lion den, but they're going to eat him. And so that's a lot of strength of character. And we don't know how the subsequent events, he holds through it all the way through the suffering, through the abuse. And if you ever look at what the crucifixion scourging was of Jesus, you realize they didn't just give him a workover. They worked him over. So he doesn't weaken all the way through that, and he doesn't weaken through the hours he's hanging there on the cross. He does it to the last breath before he says it is finished, which means that he held true. He held steady in the light of love to death, and thereby overcame it, because he didn't stop just because, I mean, death intervened, but it didn't stop him. He just kept on going and eventually resurrects to earthly consciousness again and demonstrates even more determination. And finally tells the gang that you guys got to go on with this spirit I'm going to give you, which is a power unto you from somewhere up above, and that I'm going to to the Father. So there's a lot of will there. No weakening, nothing weak about it. If he'd wanted to rule the world like Judas wanted him to do as a king of earth, he could have done it easily. But he wanted something more. And that's the lesson of love. And you can't bring that in his world, in the Christ's world. He didn't feel, not Jesus, I'm talking about the being that is the Christ, consciousness, did not feel that would serve humanity. The only way to serve humanity by that consciousness is humility towards it. It's just hard to imagine, because we can't think of any reason why a being that is the love agency of life in the universe would have that much humility towards a human being on this little planet, on this little galaxy, somewhere far, far away. So how is that true? Because it must be true. It must be justifiable. And on a personal note, I think it's justifiable because of the one possession that humanity has and will not relinquish. It's as dear to us as love and the meaning of the word I. And that's free will. There's something about free will in a human being on this planet that is sacred to us. We don't give it up lightly. You can enslave us because you can threaten our lives and so on. But in the end, we still have free will. And it's exercised by those who won't be enslaved. They'll spit in your eye. I mean, I come from Scotch-Irish. You might enslave the Irish for a while. In the English, hell, they were used to enslaving people. But the Scots, you can't enslave the Scots. That's what the English finally figured out. And not only did they figure it out, the Romans figured it out as well. They showed up and conquered England, no problem. We can take this place over in a minute. And then they tried to head up into the Scottish Highlands and tell those people what to do, and they handed them their heads on a platter. And they kept doing that. No matter what the Romans came up with, the Celtics up there in the north of England, where Scotland is, were just untamable. It's just, so to the point that the British just built Hadrian's Wall, which is a wall completely across England from one side to the other, shore to shore, 500 miles or something. Just like Trump's wall down there in the Mexican border. It's a wall, and cut a deal with the Scots and said, okay, we get it. We get it. Don't fuck with you. You stay on that side of the wall, we'll stay on this side of the wall. So the Celts said, okay, you go down there and torture the British all you want. Leave us alone. Now, that's just how human beings are. And, the 300 were that way in Greek times with the warrior tribes of those days, or the Japanese are a bit that way, a lot that way. So will and free will are really important. And we don't know where we get it. We just know we have it. Inside of us, we can feel, think, and look at life any way we want. And I might not spit in your face if you're pointing a gun at me or some other people that I care about. I might go along with the gag for a while, but sooner or later you're going to turn your back and that's it. So free will is something we've got. We haven't been demonstrating that we have love, although Jesus pointed out the fact that it's inside of you because it entered the world, came down and joined the world. Now, that doesn't make any of us Christians in the sense of joining some kind of a church. But if that enters the world, enters the human race with us, then it makes us all participants in that. Like gravity. Gravity's everywhere. You can't exempt yourself from gravity because you don't like it. I don't want love, perfect love, in me. You can wall it off in your consciousness, but you cannot extract it from yourself any more than you can extract gravity from yourself. So it's there and it's permanent. And it just is a matter of us figuring out how we want to adapt it to our other previous ideas. But in the case of the father energy, we're either all, and I'm a father of 3, and my father was a father of 4 boys. And so we're all fathers in some ways, because everybody, man, woman, and child, has the father aspect in them. I know a whole lot of women that have done a far greater job fathering their children than the idiots that they had children with, who found it more convenient to be somewhere else while their children are being raised. So anyone can father. Anyone can mother. So looking at this from a world point of view, we have to clear away all the illusions and falsities about motherhood, about fatherhood, and about sonship in that respect. And it's not easy, because we've had a lot of experiences behind what looks like fathering. Genghis Khan fathered a freaking world-conquering war coming out of some little country up there in Mongolia. And so you could think that's a really bad example of fathering. I'm not criticizing that thought, because he was pretty rough. But I don't think that expresses the true sentiment of the father. I think it expresses something else. And we have to figure all that out. So we have to come to that, so that that stream of love, because it's all streams of love, because love is the only creative power in the universe. So how are you going to create anything? A child, an architectural masterpiece, an art piece, a country, an ism? How are you going to found any of those things creatively without love? Because love is the creator, the only creator, the only king, the only ruler. So in the end, we can look at father role in the universe, and it's not going to be different anywhere else. And then we can look at all those things that are negative examples of fatherhood and realize that's not love acting. That's something else acting against love, or in its, sorry, I got a neck crick there, in its own ways. Now, there's a pile of them. It's a train wreck when you look at all the different ways in which fatherhood has been abused and used. And we can have a whole lot of judgment about all that. But it's emotional judgment, mental judgment about people doing things that gets us into those things. So maybe we should withhold a little of that judgment and look at the way in which love, misapplied, can bring about these circumstances, and how we can, by clearing our own stream of love on the creative will side, the father aspect in ourselves, obtain all the goals that are worthy of pursuing without harming, without violating harmony, without turning against love as the energy of creative power in the universe. Now, you don't know how to do that, because as soon as you try to do anything, some fool's going to stand up and get in the way. But you're not using the power of love adequately yet as a source of power in the heart, a source of power in the mind, a source of power in the body. When those 3 streams of love are starting to work through us, and we see them coming up against those things which resist love, then you can make accurate conclusions about how well love works in its purity. And I think if we give that opportunity to love in all 3 of its aspects, father, mother, son, we will see that it works. It works like magic. And we have to get them to work together in us. And as we approach something that looks like it resists us, something that out there thinks it has a different answer, we don't try to bulldoze over it. We don't try to do one of those primitive ideas of what fatherhood should do. But we stop for a moment and use the power of harmony, which is the power of will in this universe, because this is a love-based universe. And we use the power of good intention, and we use the power of unity, which is the nature of love, and the power of transformation and transmutation. If we apply these aspects of love to what we're doing, including grace, by the way, which is another aspect of love, if we have these things empowering us and we let them blend together and work towards our creation of life in the world, then we might come to a far grander conclusion about what the three streams of love are, and all the reactive illusions and glamours about it that have made it look any other way. And it takes a spiritual perception that you're willing to encounter to see how something can happen completely the opposite of what you think happened. In other words, Jehovah shows up and says, this is going to happen. The Egyptians are going to lose all their firstborn. Because what? Because they're violating the law of love. You see, and then something happens, and the archaeologists think that a heavy gas came leaking out of some environment around the place through an earthquake, which happened, and that the firstborn are the ones who get to sleep. You know, the kids slept on the roof. The kids slept up higher, but the firstborn slept closer to the ground. And so that it was there that caused death, because gas like that lies close to the earth. Now, that's somebody's archaeological idea, because they've seen that happen in the Congo or somewhere, where these gas came out of the ground and the river turns red and all those 7 plagues of Egypt things. In other words, the point is that if you're a greater being, a Jehovah-type being, and you see a group of humans violating the law of love, you recognize that the violation of that is going to produce, based on the karmic effect of that violation, not because someone judged them or decided to hurt them, they're going to experience the result or the consequences, which is all karma is, the consequences of their own actions. And that being is not going to prevent the consequences of those actions, because they would not learn any kind of a lesson if they did that. The lesson is not, don't fuck with the Jews, although that lesson seemed to have gotten somewhat learned. But the lesson was, if you violate the law, then you're going to have consequences. And so what I'm saying is that it's easy to look up and think that God came along and smited these people because they offended him. That's what Jehovah was up to. You pissed me off. Or I'm sending you to hell because you pissed me off. Or I'm going to do like Prometheus and tie you to a rock and have the vultures or crows pick at your liver. So, but these are actual consequences. Consequences of pride, consequences of ego, consequences of violating the laws of love, enslaving people. Moses and his folk were being held under duress by the Egyptians, violating the law of love and brotherhood and shared life, because they didn't see them as somebody who deserved that. Not that the Egyptians were treated much better, because it was sort of a rich versus poor society. You're either part of the Pharaoh's favored few, and you got the big house, got to be buried in the bigger tomb, got the good food, or you got to move the big rocks, one or the other. And if you were a slave, you got to move the big rocks. So I'm saying that you have to look at life and realize that it has never changed. This is an important thing to take away and think about. When did love enter the universe? When did love become something that wasn't here at the beginning? Now, just in the history of Earth, we look back at early tribes, and we don't, and some of the primitive tribes that are out there now, still hanging around in the middle of Brazil or somewhere, and we don't see the expression of loving brotherhood or something, but we don't see it all that over the top being expressed anywhere else either, if you want to look at it accurately. So the thing is that when did love? Love didn't begin on earth when Jesus got baptized by John. It was here, all the way back. And it's demonstrated in the animal kingdom to a very high degree in certain birds that mate for life and take care of their young and fight to the death to protect them, things like that. So this energy was always here. What's changed is our ability to register it in our consciousness, and then with our free will, give it importance in our consciousness. We're all registering it to a great degree these days, since events changed back from the Greeks' day or the Buddha's day, but we're not all acting on it. We're not empowering ourselves with it, partly because we don't have any real faith that the stuff will work that well. And honestly, we haven't really tried it, to be quite frank about it. And those that did try it, as in the Christ, kind of got their ass handed to them a lot of times. Now, a lot of times, you look at the Christ and you think, oh, look what they did to him. But I don't think that's the case at all. Yes, people did abuse the young guy, but he knew that. And he wasn't fighting against it. He wasn't destined to fight against it. He was destined to serve love and give that opportunity to the world of embodying it with the world. So it's actually love that they're abusing. Nobody really had any complaint about Jesus. He didn't steal anybody's shit. He didn't actually act against anybody. Barabbas, I was a jerk right there, the guy they turned loose and crucified Jesus instead, because he was a known thief. But Jesus hadn't stolen anything from anybody, hadn't harmed anybody, hadn't spoken against anybody. However, he was interfering with a long-established system in both the Romans and in the Jewish culture. The Essenes would have got along with him great over there on the Dead Sea, because the Nazarenes and the Essenes would have gotten along great because they were about the inner spiritual life of the church, of Christianity, of love. But they were a small sect and later got exterminated themselves for being a little too close to the guy that they already rejected. So we haven't really given it a shot. None of us have. But now is the time for that. And that's becoming clearly apparent in the world right this moment. And it has to be seen as an act of fatherhood. It has to be seen as an act of sonship, and it has to be seen as an act of the mother. All three. Empower yourself with all three streams. Purify yourself on all three streams. As they say in the East, make your way straight with the Lord. I don't mean the Far East, like Buddha East, I'm talking about Russian East. There's a respect for truth in certain cultures. And truth is the first aspect because it relates to will. What relates to will? Honor, truth, the basics. So make your way straight, which just means no compromises. Make love the power behind all expressions of will. In you first. Don't go running around telling everybody else, I'm going to love you straight. Purify the stream of will in yourself. We all have to do that. So it lives in us that way. And burn away all the things that we think are not that. Burn them away by stopping to focus on them and ask yourself, what's true? Because truth and will and love and free will all come in this tight package. Work on that. It's not impossible. It's really actually relatively simple. Start with it, live with it, and in one sense, it's like, don't tell a lie. Don't tell a lie. Say nothing if you need to. I don't know. I'm not speaking about the subject. You don't have to blurt out whatever it is you know. No one can force that out of you. You have free will. You can say, I don't want to make comment on subjects that I'm not an expert in. Thank you. That's free will. But don't lie, because the moment we do that, we've bent our way in ourselves to connect to the source of power. The power of the universe is in the will of the universe, and is coming forth from a place pure and direct and in absolute harmony with love. And the moment we lie about it, we bend it. We create a kink or an explosion or a death, as they say. Every lie creates a death of something. Because it's a living universe. And when we start lying about things, we create death to things that are living. It's practical and functional and true. And it's esoteric because you don't know what you killed with your lie. But if someone says to you, did you water the plants? Yeah, sure, I watered them. And we all go off somewhere and we come back, they're all dead, wilted from lack of water. That's the result of a lie. So when you think about it, all energy has consequence. Thoughts are things, emotion is power, and lies are devastating to truth. So this father aspect is the most polluted, I think, and the most convoluted of all of the streams of love. The original Trinity is a stream of three things: will, love, and intelligence. Father, Son, and Mother. Purify those streams in ourselves, and then the other streams, the streams of intelligence and the streams of science and the streams of art and the streams of magical organization and all of the other elements that make up life as a completed thing, doing the right thing, intelligent activity of any kind. We purify these streams, and then those become pure. And as they become pure, the flow of the waters of life becomes abundant and free. And everything will change on the earth. It's going to do it anyway. You might as well get ahead of the curve. Earthquakes, tornadoes, pests, sect pests, devastation of the human race, and much of the plant and animal kingdom is caused by lies, misdirected energy, deliberately distorting the flow. So think about these things in terms of in ourselves, because it's how it lives in you that makes your life a beautiful thing, an abundant thing. You don't have to worry about how it lives in your neighbor. He is not going to take anything away from you. His distortions of the three aspects of love will pollute his own pond, not ours. Now, we live together as a group, and so if one in your group is acting in this irresponsible way towards love, it's going to impact the others in the group. We know that. But when we turn to that person and love them, see them healed in their mistakes, offer them that in a way that is factual, knowing. See, if I know the truth is in you, because it's in everyone, then that's what I affirm in you. I affirm your relationship to love as truth, as will, your love as the mother, as the divine feminine, as the nurturer of all things. I affirm the expression of you as absolute love, fusing the two of will and intelligence together, and then bringing forth Christ consciousness as perfect love in a consciousness, in an I person. You can say, I am love. I am love. I am that, because that everywhere in the universe, anything that's created is created by love. So that's, in a sense, that's all there is. And to the degree that you accept that, you are everything, because you are love. Your love uncreate, and through the manifestations of the things that you have brought forth, you are love create. And you are the source of love, which came to you for that purpose. So that's Father, Mother, and Son all added together. This appreciation of the true inclusiveness and meaningfulness that the energy of love holds in life, in the universe, and in us is the study worth making. It's where humanity has now come to the place where we're going to go, why don't we do this? Why don't we try empowering ourselves with it? And those who do that, who go through the little steps it takes, come on down to the Love Foundry. We'll show you the little things you've got to do. And then you can apply them to yourself. And if it works, great. Just great. So we're going to empower ourselves with love. And in empowering it, we will then know what it is. We will know how it works, because we're doing it. And then knowing begins to grow in humanity's group experience. And as that grows, and the absolute joy of having it happen in our lives demonstrates, everybody wants in on the act. Why not? Why wouldn't you? You'd rather hold a grudge against some part of life that was screwed up and still screwed up, and you can't go back and change it, as Omar Khayyam said, who was Persian. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. Pretty true. It was true in the 1500s. It's true now. So, I mean, the Sufis, you got to love the Sufis. They really had a sense of heart. So let's take a look at these three streams. Let's purify those streams in ourselves, and then let's create with them by simply holding them in us. Love's automatically creative. You don't have to tell it to create. You just have to need to live towards something, and love in you will start manifesting it somehow. Just act on that need with the first thing that comes into your mind, and hold true to the purity of loving it, of loving yourself, loving your father, loving your mother, loving your own daughtership or sonship, either one. Just love those streams in you. And know that all the rest of the streams that got confused and muddied and we did things with are all going to purify themselves as we live from source. That's why everyone's redeemable, because all you got to do is start. It's a little difficult if you've really cemented over your fountainhead of pure love in yourself, as we do from time to time. Boy, do we. I have. Trust me, I know. I have. You can't go through war and violence and killing and craziness and the insanity that it brings into your life for day after day after day after day after day after day after day without creating things in you that block love. So undoing that can be a bitch of a problem. It can be hard work, and it can be like, oh, damn it, am I ever going to get this out of my way? But all you got to do is love it. Just love it. Love it, whatever it is. Whatever it is. And some things are hard to love, no question. No question. People do things that make it hard to love them. But that's how you redeem them. It's how you fix them, by strengthening that in them, which would have been there instead of the act that was there. And it isn't that people do things that are evil, but they do. But all they're really doing is something that some pet part of nature does that is unconscious of love. It's just unconscious of love completely. And by acting out that part of nature instead of your own part, acting out the beast instead of the human, love-based, conscious creature, we take on its karma. We take on its obstruction to love. And then we have to fix that. We have to fix it by loving that part of ourselves. You know, its beauty kills the beast. The loving of that which is trapped in a bestial energy, which is right or true or unawakened to love at the level of that bestiality, that demonic looking quality. It's just an absence of love by act, deliberate act, sometimes unconscious act, but we went along with it and we lost a little bit, and then pretty soon we lose it all. So start loving yourself and others, and it'll become clear how that works, how knowing love produces love in us and around us by stimulating it in others, not violating their free will. Love doesn't do it, and we don't do it. So our purpose is to help that understanding grow stronger in anyone who wants it. And there's ways in which you can manifest it and bring it to flower in you much faster than you otherwise think you would or should or could. Really, you can. You know, there's people that just raise things incredibly well by treating them the right way. Plants and flowers and trees and fruits and things that we produce, things that we bring about quickly in the world because we have a foundation of knowing how to love them, care for them in a concentrated way. Well, do that with yourself with love in just a few certain ways, and it will just blow all the stuff out of the way, transform, transmute, change, strengthen, and produce fantastic results in a very short time, because everyone has had far more experience with love than they realize. So once we start nurturing it in ourselves and in others, then it starts getting strong fast. And that's a powerful part of the father aspect. What do you want to father in the world? What do you desire? Desire is a word that comes from two words in Latin and something in Sanskrit, which is of the Father. What do you want to father? That should be your desire. And if you look at your desires, that's what you are fathering. They're already thoughts, they're already feelings, they're already relationships to the feminine, the masculine, the world, your appetites. So take it easy, slow down, look at what you're doing, and make some decisions, and let's clean up our act so that we father in the world love. Because everything else is just distorted love. Pretty much everything. Anyway, that's it. That's that. So we've quickly covered all three aspects not today, but in the last three podcasts. And now we will go forward with some relating of how to bring those about in ourselves in a more practical way, which means that if you want to empower your human nature with love, there's things that you can do that do that. And now we're going to talk about on the podcast as we go forward different ways in which that can happen as a human, how humans can do that for themselves and for others. You need to do certain things to get this ball rolling, but you're going to have to face some things squarely. Look in the mirror, ask yourself, do I want this? Do I want love as a conscious knowing in my life? Do I want to apply it to my life? Do I want to face and eliminate things in my ego that hate love, that don't like what it does to me? There are things that just don't like beauty. Take anything beautiful and put it out where human beings are and see how long it lasts. Put the Mona Lisa out there in the park and see how long it lasts. It's a terrible thing to see humans defacing great beauty, great effort, great art, and there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. You go to a country that's at war, you saw that 50-foot Buddha statue that had been there for thousands of years, and the Taliban just blew it apart, dynamited it to nothing. This has been going on in humanity for a million years. We take other people's art and beauty and expression of their highest and best thoughts and feelings, and then we just deface it, mark it, mar it. So there is that thing in us which hates beauty and hates love. And we act on that sometimes out of anger, fear, or frustration. So we have to find those things in ourselves if we have them and eliminate them. Eliminate them. And you eliminate them by loving them. How could you deface the beauty and art of a statue created by Buddhists? I mean, these are like the least harmful guys around by not loving them. If you love someone, you know, your kid comes home with a unicorn drawing from the third grade and you've still got it 40 years later because you love them. And it's not that it was such good art. You had to ask them, what was it? And they said, oh, it's a unicorn, Daddy. Ah, I see. Yeah, that's a beautiful unicorn. Perfect. What's that right there? Oh, that's the horn. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I had it upside down. Whatever it is, we have to learn how to love that in the world, everywhere. So, and it isn't enough to know it in principle. It isn't enough to say, yeah, you're right. If the Taliban created a beautiful monument to Islam, I would not deface it. But if you get mad enough at them, you'll whack it to the ground. Get some sledgehammers and go pound that down to gravel because we're mad at them. They set off a bomb somewhere. They did something in the name of their God as if it were better than your God or something. I have no idea how that distortion comes about inside people. It's a terrible insecurity of some kind. But it happens. And so there's only one way out of that, and that's to find a way to love, awaken love in them to the point where they realize that's not a noble act. That's not a human act. That's not an act of beauty or support or love. And when people awaken to that, they will stop those actions. They will stop their hand in the act of swinging a hammer. Now, you want to tear down the Berlin Wall, which was a separation between the East and the West. That's fine with me. I'll take a swing. But if you want to destroy someone's beauty and art, I'm not going to help you do that. If I don't like it where it is, I'll move it. We'll move it somewhere where it's better suited, if that's necessary. I mean, it's silly in a way. And in Portland, Oregon, is the largest statue of Lenin left on the planet, as far as I know. Lenin. And it's not there because the person who put it, well, I don't know exactly who owns it now, but it's just there. It's like a private property or in a park or something like that. And it's because when they tore the Soviet Union down and got mad at Lenin for a few 100 million dead people in the name of a better society, they destroyed a lot of statues. Now they've kept him around in a mummified case, so it's a kind of contradiction of terms. You would think they would have taken the corpse out and had a party, but they didn't. So the point was that they broke all these statues. Some of them, I'm sure, were quite magnificent. But somebody said, wow, that's a great piece of art. When you look in the middle of a Trafalgar Square, you see art standing around and you go, well, I don't know who Lord Nelson was. I mean, I'm sure I heard that he was somebody who got seasick and he was an admiral. I don't know how that could be. But so we don't know who these people are that they've formed statues of. We don't know that that's Robert E. Lee on the back of that horse. What we know is that some sculptor made a beautiful bronze sculpture of someone riding a horse into battle. And it's like, wow, that's a great piece of art. I don't want to destroy that. That's Robert E. Lee. We got to destroy it because Robert E. Lee was what? A patriot to his cause. So we get past that by just stopping it and asking ourselves, what the hell am I doing or thinking or feeling? And purify my streams. And then let's act on something as if we were capable of that, as if we were capable of becoming the Christs that reside in all of us, the Buddhas that reside in all of us, the great Father, Creator that lie in all of us, and the divine mothers that love unceasingly in all of us. What a day it'll be when we're all expressing that, which is coming. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end this, and let's see where it goes from there.